As the night drew near, the bustling streets of New York City quieted down, the neon lights casting long shadows on the sidewalk. A light breeze rustled the leaves of the trees lining the avenue, carrying with it the faint hum of distant conversations and laughter from the nearby cafes. In one of these cafes sat Ryan, his fingers tapping nervously against his coffee cup. The weight of the day's events hung heavy on his mind, but there was something different tonight. The atmosphere felt charged, as if the city itself was holding its breath. Across from him sat Emma, her eyes locked on his, searching for any hint of uncertainty. It had been weeks since they first met, but tonight, everything felt different. Ryan had been trying to suppress his feelings, burying them under layers of work and distractions. But the more he tried to ignore it, the stronger it became. Emma wasn't just any person. There was something magnetic about her, something that pulled him in even when he tried to fight it. Emma, however, was no stranger to the tension between them. She had felt it too, but she had been patient, giving Ryan the space he needed. She understood the walls he had built around himself, the layers of protection he had carefully constructed after years of hurt. Still, she couldn't help but wonder if tonight would be the night he would finally open up. The sound of the waiter clearing a table nearby broke their silence. Emma smiled softly, her eyes never leaving Ryan's. "You know, you've been a little distant lately," she said, her voice warm, yet laced with a hint of concern. Ryan glanced at her, the weight of her words sinking in. He opened his mouth to speak, but the words didn't come. Instead, he simply nodded. His gaze shifted to the window, where the city's skyline stood against the darkening sky, a reminder of the life he had been so focused on building. But in that moment, as the lights flickered outside, he realized something. There was more to life than just work. He had spent so much time chasing success, forgetting the simple joys of connection, of sharing moments with someone who truly understood him. Emma reached across the table, her hand gently resting on his. It was a small gesture, but it spoke volumes. She didn't push him, didn't demand answers. She simply offered him the comfort of her presence, a quiet understanding that she was there for him, no matter what. Ryan felt the tension in his chest begin to ease. He looked back at her, this time meeting her gaze fully. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I've been scared." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with the weight of unspoken truths. Emma didn't say anything at first. She didn't need to. Instead, she gave him a small, reassuring smile, her fingers squeezing his hand lightly. It was all he needed to feel a sense of calm wash over him. For the first time in a long while, Ryan felt like he wasn't carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. He was simply present in this moment, with Emma, in a city that never slept, but for once, he didn't mind. The rest of the evening passed in a comfortable silence, the kind that only two people who truly understood each other could share. As they left the cafe and stepped into the cool night air, Ryan felt something shift inside him. It wasn't a sudden revelation, but rather a quiet understanding that maybe, just maybe, he didn't have to face everything alone. The city was vast, full of possibilities, but in that moment, all he needed was Emma by his side. The next few days passed in a blur for Ryan. The weight he had been carrying seemed lighter, though he was still processing everything that had been building up inside of him. Work had not slowed down, and the demands of his career were always present, but something had changed. There was a new sense of clarity that had begun to take root in his mind, a shift that he couldn't quite explain. Emma's presence, her patience, had started to feel like a lifeline, offering him a sense of peace he had never known. One evening, after a long day at the office, Ryan found himself walking to the cafe where they had met. The familiar path felt different now, as though he was seeing the world through new eyes. The lights of the city seemed brighter, the sounds of the streets more vibrant. It was as if everything had gained a new depth. He walked in, and Emma was already there, sitting by the window, her gaze focused on the bustling street outside. When she noticed him, her face broke into a soft smile, and Ryan felt a rush of warmth. It was a simple gesture, but it meant everything. As he approached, she stood up, her hand reaching out instinctively, a silent invitation. Ryan accepted it without hesitation, the familiarity of the gesture filling him with a quiet sense of belonging. "I was wondering when you would show up," Emma said with a playful grin. "I figured you'd be here, too," Ryan replied, taking a seat across from her. The conversation flowed easily, as it always did between them, and for the first time in a long while, Ryan felt like he was truly present. They talked about everything and nothing: work, the city, memories from their past, and Ryan found himself laughing more than he had in weeks. It felt effortless, like the weight of the world had been momentarily forgotten. As the evening wore on, the cafe began to empty out, and the two of them lingered, content in each other's company. The outside world felt distant, as if time had slowed down just for them. Ryan's mind wandered to the future, to the possibilities of what might come next. For the first time, he wasn't overwhelmed by the thought of what lay ahead. The future didn't seem like an impossible mountain to climb anymore. It felt like a path that he could walk, step by step, with Emma by his side. As they stood to leave, Emma glanced up at him, her expression soft and thoughtful. "Do you ever wonder what the next chapter will be?" she asked quietly. Ryan thought for a moment before answering. "I think the next chapter is already starting," he said. "And I'm ready for it." They stepped out into the cool night air, the lights of the city shimmering around them. Ryan felt lighter than he had in a long time, as though he had finally started to understand what it meant to truly live, not just exist. And with Emma by his side, he knew that whatever the future held, he wouldn't have to face it alone. In the weeks that followed, Ryan and Emma settled into a rhythm. The city continued its relentless hum around them, but the moments they shared together stood as small, quiet havens. Ryan's world, once dominated by deadlines and meetings, began to feel a little more balanced, a little more alive. He found himself carving out time for Emma, even when work tried to pull him away. It wasn't easy, but he was learning to prioritize the things that mattered most. Emma was always patient, always understanding, never pushing him to move faster than he was ready for. They took long walks through Central Park, enjoyed casual dinners at quiet restaurants, and spent evenings at the movies, the world outside fading into the background as they enjoyed each other's company. One Saturday afternoon, as they sat in a cozy corner of a local bookstore, flipping through novels and sipping coffee, Emma turned to Ryan with a thoughtful expression on her face. "Have you ever thought about what comes next?" she asked. Ryan paused, his fingers absently tracing the rim of his coffee cup. "What do you mean?" he asked, genuinely curious. "I mean," Emma continued, "where do we go from here? We've both been through a lot, but we're not getting any younger. Do you think about the future?" Ryan leaned back in his chair, considering her words. He had thought about the future, but always in terms of his career, his goals, the things he needed to accomplish. He had never truly thought about his future with someone else. It wasn't that he didn't care for Emma, it was just that, for so long, he had been focused on surviving, not thriving. But something about Emma made him want to try. He hadn't felt this way in a long time. "I guess I've been too focused on getting through the day," he said slowly. "I haven't really thought about what comes next. But I'm starting to." Emma smiled gently, her eyes soft. "I'm not asking for answers right now," she said. "I just want you to know that I'm here, no matter what. I'm not going anywhere." Ryan felt a weight lift from his chest. He didn't need to have everything figured out. Not yet, anyway. "Thank you," he said, his voice quiet but sincere. "I'm not sure what the future holds, but I know I want you in it." For the first time in a long while, Ryan felt a sense of peace about the future. It wasn't something he had to rush toward, but something he could step into, slowly and with someone by his side. As the afternoon wore on, they continued to talk, the easy conversation flowing between them. Outside, the world continued to move at its usual pace, but for Ryan, time seemed to slow, and for once, he wasn't in a hurry. He had learned that life didn't have to be a race to the finish. Sometimes, it was about enjoying the journey. And with Emma, he was learning to enjoy every step. The days grew longer, and with them, Ryan's sense of contentment deepened. Life had become more than just a series of tasks to complete. He was learning to appreciate the moments he shared with Emma, the simplicity of being present with someone who truly understood him. They found comfort in the small things, like quiet Sunday mornings spent at the farmer's market, or evenings when they would cook dinner together in Emma's cozy apartment, the aroma of fresh herbs filling the room. It wasn't the grand gestures that mattered, but the steady rhythm they were creating together. One evening, after a particularly long week at work, Ryan found himself at Emma's apartment, the familiar warmth of her home offering a sense of calm he had come to crave. She was in the kitchen, preparing a simple meal, humming softly to herself. Ryan leaned against the doorframe, watching her for a moment. There was something so peaceful about the way she moved, the way she carried herself with quiet confidence. It made him feel at ease, like nothing else in the world mattered except the space they shared. Emma glanced over her shoulder and smiled when she saw him. "You look exhausted," she said, setting down the spoon she was stirring with. "Long day." Ryan nodded, taking a seat at the counter. "Yeah, it's been a bit much. But I'm glad to be here." Emma set a plate of food in front of him, the scent of garlic and rosemary filling the air. "You're always welcome here," she said softly, sitting next to him. They ate in silence for a while, the only sound the occasional clink of silverware against plates. It wasn't uncomfortable, just peaceful. Ryan realized how much he had come to rely on these moments, these quiet times when he could just be with her, without the pressure of the outside world. After dinner, they settled into the living room, the soft glow of the lamp casting a warm light over the space. Ryan sat on the couch, his legs stretched out in front of him, while Emma curled up next to him with a book. He watched her for a moment, his mind drifting as he traced the lines of her face. He had never been one to get caught up in romantic ideals, but with Emma, it felt different. He wasn't sure when it had happened, but somewhere along the way, he had started to see a future with her. Not just as a passing chapter, but as a part of something real, something lasting. Emma turned a page in her book, then looked up at him. "What are you thinking about?" she asked, her voice soft and gentle. Ryan hesitated for a moment before answering. "I was just thinking about how lucky I am," he said, his voice quiet but sincere. "I didn't expect any of this, you know? But I'm glad it's happening." Emma smiled, her eyes meeting his. "Me too," she said. For a long while, they simply sat together, the world outside fading away as they shared the kind of quiet connection that words couldn't quite capture. It wasn't perfect, and life would undoubtedly throw its challenges their way, but in that moment, they didn't need anything more than each other. Ryan knew that whatever the future held, they would face it together. And for the first time in a long time, that thought didn't scare him. It brought him a sense of peace he hadn't realized he was missing. As autumn settled over the city, the crisp air and the changing colors of the leaves brought a new sense of freshness to Ryan and Emma's routine. The world outside was shifting, but the steady rhythm of their time together remained. Ryan found himself looking forward to the simple moments they shared, like the Sunday afternoons spent exploring new neighborhoods or the late-night talks about dreams, fears, and what lay ahead. One evening, after a particularly long day at work, Ryan stood outside Emma's apartment building, the cool air brushing against his face. He had come to see her as he did often now, but tonight felt different. There was something he wanted to say, something he had been thinking about for a while, but hadn't been sure how to express. As he entered the building and made his way to Emma's door, his heart was pounding slightly, a mixture of excitement and nerves. He knocked softly, and Emma answered almost immediately, her face lighting up when she saw him. "Hey," she said, stepping aside to let him in. "You're right on time. I was just about to start dinner." Ryan smiled, but his mind was focused on the conversation he had been rehearsing in his head. "I've actually been thinking," he began, his voice a little unsure at first. Emma looked up at him, her brow furrowing slightly with curiosity. "Thinking about what?" she asked, her tone gentle and encouraging. Ryan took a deep breath. "About us. About everything. I've been really happy, more than I ever thought I could be. And I guess I've just been realizing that this isn't just something temporary for me." Emma set the knife down, her expression softening. She walked over to him and placed a hand on his arm, her touch warm and reassuring. "I'm glad to hear that," she said quietly. Ryan took another deep breath, his words coming more easily now. I've spent so much of my life chasing after things, working, always trying to get to the next step, the next goal. And then I met you, and it's like, I don't have to keep running anymore. I just want to be here with you. For as long as this lasts. Emma's eyes met his, and for a moment, everything felt still. The noise of the city outside, the busy lives they both led, all of it faded away. It was just the two of them, standing in the warmth of the apartment, a quiet understanding passing between them. Ryan, she said softly, her voice a little shaky with emotion. I'm here too. I'm not going anywhere. And I want to be with you. For as long as we can be. A wave of relief washed over Ryan, and for the first time in a long time, he felt like everything was aligning. He hadn't known what he had been waiting for, but now he knew. It wasn't a grand moment or a big declaration. It was this, the quiet connection, the shared understanding, the sense that they were moving forward together. The rest of the evening passed in a haze of comfort and ease. They cooked dinner together, their usual routine of laughter and small talk filling the space. As they sat down to eat, the world outside continued to turn, but inside, there was only the quiet contentment of two people who had found something real. Ryan looked across the table at Emma, the soft glow of the candlelight reflecting in her eyes. In that moment, he realized that he didn't need to have all the answers. They didn't need to know exactly where they were headed. All they needed was to be here, now, with each other. As winter approached, the city transformed into a landscape of sharp contrasts. The chilly air made the sidewalks slick with frost, and the trees, now bare, stood like quiet sentinels against the gray sky. Ryan and Emma continued to find warmth in each other, even as the world outside seemed colder and more distant. They had settled into a comfortable routine that neither of them had expected but both cherished. Their relationship, still new but undeniably real, had become a constant source of support and happiness in Ryan's life. One Friday evening, after a particularly demanding week, Ryan found himself waiting for Emma at the cafe where they first met. The familiar buzz of conversation around him felt different tonight, almost distant, as if the world had faded into the background. When Emma arrived, her cheeks flushed from the cold and a smile playing on her lips, Ryan felt the weight of the day lift immediately. You look like you've been running around all day, Emma teased, her eyes sparkling as she slid into the seat across from him. Ryan chuckled, running a hand through his hair. You could say that. But I'm just glad to be here now. They ordered their usual drinks, settling into the warmth of the cafe. As the minutes passed, the conversation drifted to their plans for the weekend. They had talked about taking a short trip upstate, escaping the city for a few days to enjoy the quiet of nature. Emma had been excited about the idea, but Ryan, despite the allure of a peaceful getaway, couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something wasn't quite right. He didn't want to admit it, not yet, but he was beginning to feel the pressure of balancing his life with Emma and the demands of his career. There was still so much he hadn't figured out. The uncertainty was starting to feel heavier. As they continued to talk, Emma seemed to notice the shift in his mood. She reached across the table, her hand brushing against his. Hey, what's on your mind? She asked softly, her tone full of concern. Ryan looked at her, the weight of his thoughts clear in his eyes. I don't know, he began slowly. It's just, things have been moving so fast. I feel like I'm not giving you all of me, like I'm always caught up in something else. Emma's expression softened, and she gave his hand a gentle squeeze. Ryan, you don't have to have everything figured out. We're in this together, and we'll figure it out as we go. I'm not going anywhere. Her words, simple and honest, seemed to ease some of the tension he had been holding. He had been so focused on making sure everything was perfect that he had forgotten the most important part of their relationship. It wasn't about perfection. It was about being there for each other, no matter what. I know, Ryan said, his voice quieter now. I just don't want to let you down. Emma smiled softly. You're not letting me down. You're here. That's all that matters. As the evening went on, Ryan felt a sense of peace settle over him. The worries that had been swirling in his mind seemed a little less urgent, and for the first time in a while, he allowed himself to just be. He realized that, with Emma by his side, he didn't have to have all the answers. Together, they could figure it out. And that was enough. As they walked out into the cold night air, the city around them felt less intimidating. It was just the two of them, hand in hand, walking toward whatever came next. The snow began to fall gently over the city, blanketing the streets and buildings in a soft layer of white. It was a quiet, peaceful night, the kind where everything seemed to slow down and the usual bustle of New York faded into the background. Ryan and Emma had just returned from their weekend getaway upstate, a trip that had been as much about escaping the city as it was about giving themselves time to reflect. They had stayed in a small cabin nestled in the woods, where the only sounds were the wind rustling through the trees and the crackle of the fire in the hearth. It had been a perfect escape, a brief pause from the pressures of everyday life. Now, as they stood on the balcony of Emma's apartment, watching the snow fall, Ryan couldn't help but feel a sense of contentment settle over him. Everything felt right, in a way he hadn't experienced before. Emma stood beside him, her hand resting gently in his, her gaze fixed on the snowflakes drifting down from the sky. The city lights below twinkled through the falling snow, casting a soft glow over the streets. "I never get tired of this view," Emma said, her voice quiet but filled with warmth. Ryan nodded, his eyes still fixed on the city below. "It's beautiful," he agreed. "I've always been so caught up in work, in trying to keep everything together, that I never took the time to just enjoy the moment, to appreciate the things that really matter." Emma turned to look at him, her expression soft. "You've been carrying a lot on your shoulders," she said gently. "But you don't have to do it alone." Ryan met her gaze, the weight of her words sinking in. He had spent so much of his life trying to control everything, trying to handle every challenge on his own. But with Emma, he had found something different. Something real. "I know," he said, his voice steady. "And I'm starting to realize that I don't have to. With you, I don't have to figure everything out on my own." Emma smiled, her eyes warm with understanding. "You never have to," she said softly. For a long moment, they stood together in silence, watching the snow fall, the world around them feeling both distant and incredibly close. It was a simple moment, but it felt significant. Ryan realized that in the quiet, in the stillness, he had found something he had been searching for without even knowing it. It wasn't perfection. It wasn't about having everything figured out. It was about connection. About being with someone who understood him, who accepted him, flaws and all. And for the first time in a long time, Ryan felt at peace. He wasn't rushing toward something. He wasn't trying to solve every problem. He was simply here in this moment with Emma. "I'm glad you're here," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Emma squeezed his hand gently, her eyes meeting his. "I'm glad I'm here, too," she replied. Together, they watched the snow fall, the world outside fading into the quiet of the night. Whatever came next, Ryan knew that he was ready to face it, not alone, but with Emma by his side. The weeks after their quiet evening on the balcony felt like a gentle unfolding of something they both had been searching for. Ryan found himself increasingly present, no longer buried under the weight of his career or the constant push for success. He realized that the balance he had been seeking had always been within reach, just hidden behind his own fears and doubts. Emma continued to be a steady presence in his life, a calm reassurance in the storm of his thoughts. Together, they navigated the quiet rhythms of everyday life, finding comfort in the smallest of moments. It wasn't always easy. There were days when Ryan felt himself slipping into old habits, the pressures of work creeping back in, but Emma never let him go too far. She was patient with him, reminding him that there was no need to rush. One weekend, they took a trip to a nearby lake, a quiet spot that Emma had visited as a child. The lake was serene, surrounded by tall trees that stretched toward the sky, their branches bare from the winter chill. The air was crisp, and as they walked along the shore, Ryan felt a sense of peace wash over him. It was the kind of peace he had been craving for so long. The sound of their footsteps crunching through the snow was the only noise, the world around them quiet and still. Emma had packed a small picnic, and they found a spot near the water to sit, the silence between them comfortable and easy. Ryan couldn't help but smile as Emma handed him a warm thermos of tea. "This place always makes me feel like everything will be okay," she said, her voice soft, as if the quiet of the lake demanded a quieter tone. Ryan took a sip, feeling the warmth spread through him. He looked out at the lake, the sunlight shimmering on the surface. "I think I understand," he said quietly. "It's peaceful here. Like nothing can touch us." Emma nodded, her eyes meeting his. "Exactly," she said. They sat in silence for a while, letting the stillness settle around them. Ryan realized how much he had been missing these moments of quiet, moments where the world slowed down, and all that mattered was the present. The future was still uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, he wasn't afraid of it. He didn't need to have everything figured out. He just needed to keep moving forward, step by step, with Emma by his side. After some time, they packed up their things and walked back to the car, the snow crunching beneath their boots. Ryan felt lighter than he had in months. He didn't know what the future would bring, but he was starting to believe that it didn't have to be something he needed to control. There was a kind of freedom in letting go of that need, in simply being present, in living for the moments that mattered most. As they drove back to the city, the quiet between them was comfortable, the kind of silence that spoke volumes. Ryan reached over and took Emma's hand, squeezing it gently. "Thank you for this," he said, his voice low but full of meaning. Emma smiled, her fingers tightening around his. "You don't have to thank me. I'm just glad we're here, together." And in that moment, Ryan knew that whatever came next, they would face it together. There was nothing else he needed to figure out. The future could wait. Right now, he was exactly where he needed to be.